I've often heard that anthropomorphizing an animal is the worst injustice you can do to it. This was a lesson I learned a few summers back in Normandy. I was at my desk one afternoon writing a letter when I heard a faint buzzing sound. Curious, I went to the window, and there, in a web, I saw what looked like an angry raisin. It was a trapped fly. "Help me! Help me!" And as I bent forward to get a closer look, a spider rushed forth and carried it screaming to a little woven encampment. It was like watching someone you hate get mugged. 3 seconds of hardcore violence, and when it was over, you just wanted it to happen again. Introduction for April in Paris by David Sedaris. I stood at the window with my mouth hanging open. All I recognized was a profound sense of wonder. How had I spent so much time in this house and never noticed what was going on around me? If the giant house spiders barked or went after my food, I may have caught on to their existence quicker, but as it was, they were as quiet and unobtrusive as Amish farmers. The house in Normandy looked haunted, cobwebs sagging from the rafters and curtain rods like campaign bunting. If one was in my way, I'd knock it down, but that all changed when I discovered that first giant house spider. April, I called her. After writing her name on an index card and taping it to the wall, I found my interest spreading to her neighbors. The window they lived in was like a tenement building, one household atop another on either side of the window. Above April was Marty, and then Curtis and Paolo. Across the way were Linda, Russell, Big Chief Tammy, and a sexless little speck of a thing I decided to call Leslie. And this was just one window. Seeing as I'd already broken the #1 rule of a good nature documentary, not to give names to your subjects, I went ahead and broke the next one, which was not to get involved in their lives. A spider's food needs to be alive and struggling, and because our house was overrun and I had some time on my hands, I decided to help out. In my opinion, the best place to catch flies is against a window pane. Something about the glass seems to confuse them, and they get even dopier when you come at them with an open jar. Once one was in, I'd screw on the lid and act like I was shaking a cocktail. The little body would slam against the sides. Once my prey was good and woozy, I'd unscrew the lid and tip the jar toward the waiting spider. The fly would drop, and after lying still for a moment or two, it would begin to twitch and rouse itself. A cartoon drunk coming to after a long night. "What the heck?" I imagined it saying. Then it would notice the wings and foreheads of earlier victims. "I've gotta get out of here." A whisper of footsteps off in the distance. And just as the fly tasted futility, the monster was upon it. "And cut!" I would yell. Watching this spectacle became addictive, and so, in turn, did catching flies. There were days when I'd throw a good 3 dozen of them to their deaths, this at the expense of everything else I was supposed to be doing. As the spiders moved from healthy to obese, their feet tore holes in their webs. Running became a chore, and I think their legs started chafing. By this point, there was no denying my emotional attachment. There were nights that first summer when I'd get out of bed at 3 a.m. and wander into my office with a flashlight. Everyone would be wide awake, but it was always April that I singled out. If I thought about her 100 times a day, it only seemed fair that she thought about me as well. My name, my face, I didn't expect these things to register, but in the way that a body feels the warmth of the sun, I fully believed that she could sense my presence and missed it while I was away. "It's all right," I'd tell her. "It's only me." Often I'd take out my magnifying glass and stare at the chaos that was her face. Most people would have found it grotesque, but when you're in love, there is nothing so abstract or horrible that it can't be thought of as cute. As the summer progressed, so did the mysteries. Spiders relocated, both male and female, and I started noticing a lot of spare parts, a forsaken leg or palp lying in a web that used to belong to Paolo or Philip or the Right Reverend Karen. What had once seemed like a fine neighborhood quickly became a dangerous one, the tenants all thuggish and transitory. Maybe April was more respected than anyone else in her window unit. Maybe her enemies knew that someone was watching her, but for whatever reason, she was one of the few spiders that managed to stay put and survive. In mid-September, I decided to return to the city, and at the last minute, I decided to buy a plastic terrarium and to take her with me. The April in Paris business didn't occur to me until we were on the train, and I held her container against the window saying, "Look, the Eiffel Tower!" Funny the details that slip your notice until it's too late. The fact, for instance, that we don't really have flies in Paris, at least not in my apartment. I'd been telling myself for months that April needed me, though, of course, she didn't. An adequate amount of prey stumbled into her web, and she caught it quite capably on her own. In Normandy, anyway. Now, though, trapped in a fourth-floor apartment in a plastic box, she honestly did need me, and the responsibility weighed a ton. Giant house spiders can go without eating for 3 months, but whenever I returned home empty-handed, I could feel her little spider judgment seeping from the plastic box. The face that had once seemed goofy was now haughty and expectant. I imagined her saying, "I guess I had you figured all wrong." April and I took the train in late October, and I released her into her old home. I guess I thought that she would just move back in, but in our absence, her web had fallen to ruin. One corner had become completely unmoored, its ragged, fly-speckled edge drooping like a filthy petticoat from the window ledge. "I'm pretty sure it can be fixed," I told her, but before I could elaborate or even say goodbye, she took off running, and I never saw her again. There have been other spiders since then, a new population every summer, and while I still feed them and monitor the comings and goings, it's with a growing but not unpleasant distance, an understanding that spiders, unlike mammals, do only what they are supposed to do. Whatever drives the likes of April is private and severe, and my attempts to humanize it only moved me further from its majesty. I still can't resist the fly catching, but in terms of naming and relocating, I've backed off considerably. I suppose there's a place in everyone's heart that's reserved for another species. My own is covered in cobwebs rather than dog or cat hair, but this does not mean it does not exist. It does. And I felt it ache when Hurricane Katrina hit. The TV was on, a grandmother signaled from her rooftop, and I found myself wondering, with something akin to panic, if there were any spiders in her house.